listening to Southpod, Rise of a Region, hosted by Stanfield Gray and John Yarian.
I'm here with Benny Starr, hip-hop artist from Pineville, South Carolina. Are you currently based in Charleston, Benny?
I am. Yes, I am.
Super cool. Well, I kind of wanted to begin with the big picture of hip-hop in the South, and particularly here in Charleston. For a lot of our viewers and listeners who maybe aren't as well versed, or even if they are into, let's say they're into hip-hop, but they're only aware of national superstars. People they follow on Spotify, and they don't think locally about their community, who's out there striving, being creative, producing great, content, songs, distributing it. So what does that look like in the South to you? And what does it look like here in Charleston from the big picture view?
Oh, I think hip hop in the South is very locally in these local pockets like Charleston, South Carolina, where we're at now. Other places like Atlanta, places like Houston, all across these different cities, all across the South, Mississippi, with guys like Big Crit, and I'm sure who other artists who are local there. It holds a mirror up in a lot of ways to things that are culturally significant to where that city is, and the customs and the practices and the people. And so in Charleston, for people who are not more familiar with like Charleston specifically, there's a long line. I mean, I grew up in the Low Country, so I grew up listening to guys like, Pacino Dino and, Marley Marl, and the list goes on. It's a long list of Mr. Taylor, a long list of hip hop artists that you grow up listening to who are specific to Charleston and specific to the Low Country. So there's a sound there that has been very influential, prominent and influential. Yeah.
So some of those communities you mentioned are artists jumping on Reddit boards? Are they communicating through social media channels saying, hey, I love that track, man, that's good stuff, collaborate? And
right.
What does that look like? Is there a lot of communication?
There's a lot of communication. I grew up in a time where I came of age. When I say grow up, I came of age along with a good friend of mine, who's also a really dope local hip hop artist to Charleston. His name is Matt Monday. And we came up together in a time when the internet was then exploding. So the internet was exploding, and it changed the game It changed the game as far as CDs and things like that. That used to be more hand to hand and like handshake oriented. It became the online market, like Dat Piff, live mixtapes, that whole mixtape era where you could post things online and you could reach new fans and new supporters, not only where you were, but states away, half a country away, and other countries even. So then that became real popular, and that coincided with the boom of social media as well. So you got Twitter, Instagram, message boards. There have been lots of message boards that I found my music. People who have been like ardent supporters of what I do, they post my stuff on like online groups about sports and hip hop, et cetera, et cetera. So that definitely plays a big part, I think, in a lot of artists' reach and how they can get their music out there, and how they also can network with other artists and connect with people.
So do you find that personally more beneficial than the traditional route where you had to get signed by a label, put it in a store, it was very cumbersome? I find it interesting. I find it to be interesting in a way that it allows you to keep a lot of your control, the control of what you want to create and what you can make, how you can monetize what you create. It gives you the opportunity to connect with people in an organic way. That those are the lifetime fans that I've experienced. From what I've experienced, those people you connect with very organically, and they connect to your music, not only to your music, but to your content and to you as a person and what that content represents. So if I'm making music about specific things that are specific to me and where I am and where I'm living, and people can relate, then those people that I'm connecting with via online message boards and social media, they really forge like this lifelong connection with you and your music. And with all of that, you can keep the control of what you create, and you can monetize it in a way that I think it benefits those who want to keep their independence. And I'm one of those artists who I'm looking to keep my independence. Well, let's take that, that organic route back to the beginning and talk a little about your creative process. Now,
Was Benny Starr the kind of kid that wrote poems, music jingles, essays, or was the focus always on song lyrics? What did it look like for you in the beginning?
Oh yeah, the focus definitely wasn't on song lyrics, I don't think, early on, but I definitely wrote a lot. I wrote a lot as a kid. I read a lot. That was the one thing. My mom, she worked a lot, but she had a bookshelf in her bedroom. And so when my grandma would watch us, when she would go to work, she would have like 2, 3 jobs. And my grandma would watch us during the day, like during the summer when we get home from school. And I would just read a lot. That was always like one of the focuses in the house. Like we may not have had a lot, but education was like a big, big thing. So I would read a lot and end up writing these short stories. And, as time went on, I'm moving through, elementary, middle school, and I would get these awards for short stories. And eventually that became poetry that, whether it was a Black History program at school, and I would read it on the intercom, et cetera, et cetera. Then as I got older, I guess about high school, you go through adolescence and, hip hop, and you're connecting with hip hop culture and everything. And I think it became like a hobby that I would share with people privately, that I would be experimenting with writing lyrics, because that was the evolution of where my poetry went to. But I never pursued it seriously until I got to college.
Who were a couple of the early authors you were into that
Oh man,
most related?
Early on, like 3rd grade, 2nd grade, I remember it being a time where Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn, the classics, Jules Verne, Journey to the Center of the Earth, Three Musketeers, Alexander Dumas. Like these were just the things that I was reading, any and everything I could get my hands on. So teachers would bring books to class, and we had a program at our specific elementary school called the Accelerated Reader Program. And you would get these little points as you would complete these books and take the tests on them. And eventually you can redeem them for like a pizza party or like personal pan pizza from Pizza Hut and stuff like that. I remember very vividly. So I would read literally any and everything I can get my hands on that was in the library or in the classroom.
So you're kind of secretly dabbling with lyrics. You're going to share some with friends. What was the moment you thought, I think I could put this together and craft a song that people would want to listen to?
When I got to college and I met who is still one of my best friends in this business and a contemporary of mine, also Matt Monday, we met our freshman year at USC Upstate, and we both had a theater class together. And we both realized that we both rap. And we started going to one another's cribs, and we would just be, kicking it, freestyling. We would play basketball together and things like that. And then I saw that he was actually working on an album. And I was like, wait a minute, what you mean you're working on an album? And then he just broke everything down to me. One of his good friends who also went to USC in Columbia, South Carolina, he was the producer. And he invited me into a studio session they had one night. We drove from Spartanburg, South Carolina, where we were going to school, to Columbia. And it was like an all-night studio session kind of thing. And he allowed me to get on like 2 songs. And we just sat there and we wrote and we performed it. We recorded it. And at that moment, on the drive back, is when I realized, like, okay, I'm seeing that how this is really going down, like the background to all of this. And I was like, I think I could really do this. And Matt, great friend that he is, he offered me like any assistance he could offer me, like any tips, anything. And he just always affirmed me. And that was the moment that I realized like I could do that.
Love it. So about what time frame are you living in Spartanburg? How long ago was that?
I would say my graduating year, 2006. I moved there in 2006, and I was there until about 2017, actually.
Okay, so fast forward, your current music, you blend a lot of soul, R&B
Yes.
samples. You recite influences like Nas. How do you put together the tracks and the material behind it? What does that process look like for you today?
I think I've always been a really conceptual person. That's the way that I express things. I was just having this conversation the other day, and I'll take a concept and be able to explain what I'm feeling or what I'm experiencing through a concept itself. So all of my albums, I'm more so an album artist. So I have to create a body of work to tell a complete story, track by track.
So as you're crafting the songs, you're thinking of it as a concept, a theme. Are you also visualizing those scenes? I mean, how deep are you going into the storyboard of the material?
I try to visualize it as well. Like on my previous project, my previous album, Free Lunch, I took the free breakfast program that the Black Panthers created, that they would serve children before school. The idea that serving them food would also, it would nourish them. Like we all need breakfast as the most important meal of the day, but besides what it would nourish them, realizing that someone cares about you that much to think about if you're going to go to school on a full stomach, that idea. So taking that idea as a concept and telling a story of where I was as a 25, 26, 27-year-old man experiencing all these feelings of what it feels like to be Black in America, a Black male in the South, things that I'm learning, things that I'm feeling, things that I'm growing, expressing it through all of that, through different song concepts and taking concepts and flipping them on its head and revealing different things. That's just the way I create. And I think it works for me because I'm a very lyrical and descriptive person when I'm writing music.
Well, let's talk about politics for a minute. Your music is political in nature. You touch on historical themes, social issues. A lot of artists often decide they're going to be an artist that does discuss social issues. They're going to confront something head on, or they're going to be a pop star. They're going to make that decision.
Right.
For you, did you say, okay, this is going to be the trajectory of my career. It's what feels most natural to me. I've got to go down that path. Or are you just kind of open to exploring issues, whether they're political and social in nature, or if there's something a little more, esoteric or just day-to-day party kind of songs? How do you view that as Benny the artist?
I think I'm a product of a lot of what I grew up listening to, what my mom and the people around me grew up playing. A lot of like soul, old school, Aretha Franklin, Marvin Gaye, Curtis Mayfield. And I connected with something that I didn't realize until an early age. It was an authenticity in what they were doing. They could make the pop song. They could make a song you could dance to, and a lot of them did. Because we have range of expression and range of things we like to feel. But I realized early on that my gift as a writer was to express things that I've experienced, express things that I'm witnessing around me, and to kind of critique or speak on things that some people find political. There are some people who take political concepts and themes and put them in a box. But me personally, living the life that I've lived, being Black and being in the South, I've seen how political things are a part of everyday life. So there's a political element to all of everything that I do create, even when with the concept of like love. Like I could write a love song, but there is a political element to love, and because of the way in which Black people have been able or have been stopped from expressing iterations of their love and what that looked like in America. So I'm not really interested in being a pop star per se. I'm interested in being able to lean in as much to being able to tell authentic, real stories in a really high quality way, artistically.
So like Marvin Gaye, What's Going On, The Revolution. Things like
yes.
that. So it sounds like you feel a personal responsibility to convey an authentic Black experience in the South. Is that fair to say?
I do. Yes, definitely. I definitely feel like that.
Great. So, are you content sharing that as an artist from the stage, or do you also feel like an activist in other realms? Are you engaging with people in the political sphere? I know you've got a show coming up, and we'll get to that in a minute, that's going to involve voter registration drive and some of those things. But do you draw a divide between those, or do you just sort of follow the path, and if you are passionate about something, you engage in?
I think I do a little bit of both. I know that as an artist, I stand on the shoulders of guys that came before me, women and men who came before me, like, James Baldwin. And I see how you can take your art, take your artistry, and lend it to social issues, activism, the things that are going on in your community, the things that are going on with the people in the community that you live in. And I think when it comes to social change, the arts whether it's poetry, whether it's the writers, whether it's the musicians, we've always been on the forefront of social change, as we should be, because we're the ones who are in many ways capable of conceptualizing ideas that may be ahead of where the status quo is, that may be ahead of where other people are. And so it's our responsibility to lean back in to connecting with the people around us and the people who look like us, marginalized people, and championing progress, championing freedom, working with those who are out on the front lines every day, whether they be activists, whether they be people just pushing the freedoms, pushing the goals and the dignity of everyday people, marginalized people, working people. So I think those lines can be blurred, especially in the millennial generation. What we're seeing is we don't have to conform to old rules. We can take some cues from those that came before us, but we're also free to paint this thing in the way we want it to look.
So in the future, thinking of a multi-channel approach, digital natives, do you feel like what you are creating and other hip hop artists who are expressing their experiences, is that going to take the play, or it won't replace, but is that the medium that historians and documentarians will reflect upon the same way they did, like James Baldwin and Gwendolyn Brooks and authors from the 50s, 60s, 70s? It's hip hop that the most vital and essential way to express that today?
Yeah, that's one of my goals as an artist. One of those goals is to operate at my highest and best use. And because it's so passionate for me and it's so authentic for me, I always want to lend my art to the people that provide a lot of the inspiration. It's my parents. It's the people who, share in the same struggles as me. It's people who have struggles that I don't share in, but I connect with them in solidarity. And so making sure that in the grand scheme of things, I'm always on the side of people. I'm always on the side of marginalized people. I'm always on the side of freedom and creativity. Those are the things that I want to always have my art to stand beside, even if that means that my art may or may not reach a level of pop stardom. I'll feel really content that I gave my life and what I create to like the cause that is most noble to me. And that's the people.
People, I love it. Well, let's talk about distribution and marketing for a second. Mm-hmm. Let's put our business hat on, because South Pod is a show about the rise of a region, but we do that through the lens of entrepreneurship.
Right.
And so some people have a very resume-defined route. They go work for the company and they work their way up through the ranks. Other people have a startup and they create a company and they're trying to get people to believe in that thing. And that, I think that also applies in many ways to an artist. You're creating a world, you're creating content, and then you're testing it in the marketplace to see how people respond to it. So you produce singles, EPs, mixtapes, you do freestyle performances. Mm-hmm. What are some of the channels today that other artists should look to that what would you recommend to an up and coming hip hop artist? How, what's the best way to get their material out there? What's the smartest way to distribute it? How should they engage with that community of people?
I would tell them artistically find their sound, find their voice, understand who they are, number one, because that goes to your brand. What are you representing? What do you want people to think every time they hear your name or they see your face? And that'll help you lean into what type of music or what type of artistic expression you're going to put out there in the world. Now, once you do that, think about how you're presenting, what you're presenting, and who you're targeting. Think about the demographic that you want to connect with your music, that you think will connect with your music, and how you want them to be open to listening to you. So when they see your image, when they hear your music, how are you represented in the press? I would also tell them to utilize all the free platforms that we have access to, which is like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And I would personally, because I'm like this analytics kind of junkie when it comes to stuff like that, because you have to be. It's one way that you can help yourself as an independent artist understand who is tuning into you. What are they tuning into you? What they do like from you. And you can work that into your presentation to them. So learn about impressions, engagement, your reach, who your target audience is, where your music is going, who's I mean, and these things are available in a lot of these free platforms, even streaming when it comes to like Spotify. These are things that you can directly implement into your approach because the internet is such a vast place, and it's also a tool. And I would get people to utilize that, artists, especially young artists, to utilize that as best they can.
And are you deliberate about those audiences? Like, are you thinking, okay, I'm going to play a venue that attracts primarily a white audience, or one that attracts a black audience, or one that's a mixed audience? Are you being strategic and thinking about those different audiences, or are you just looking broadly at who's reacting and engaging with those people, no matter who they are?
I'm always strategic, and what I will say is awareness. Like, I'm always aware what venue, like if this is a venue that is proposing, hey, we would like you to do a show here, or if I'm reaching out to this venue about doing a show here, I'm usually aware of what their customer base, what the demographics look like. Then I try to be aware of, in the area where this venue may be, what does my reach look like there? Do I have an idea of how many people I can put into this venue, what those demographics would look like, how far the people who support me would travel to see me? Do I have fans in this area? And I think you can get a pretty much a good view of all of this. One of the ways that I've been able to do that is through analytics. Now, there's a half of that you just learn through face-to-face contact. Very few things can replace like face-to-face contact, that handshake sort of interaction, especially in the South. Like, that still means a lot, but you can enhance that with what you learn from analytics, and you can put yourself in positions to make those handshake, those live music, those live interactions that last a lifetime. I think analytics can help you to increase the number of those moments you can have as an artist.
How widely have you toured?
Southeastern region, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia.
Good. And you have a new album coming out, a water
yes.
album. Give our audience a sense of what to expect from that album, and then we'll touch on the upcoming show on September 22nd.
Oh, definitely. This album, it's the follow-up to my last album in 2015 that came out on Juneteenth 2015, entitled Free Lunch. So this album, a water album, is just another step forward for me, maturity-wise and growth as an artist. All of my albums, I like to believe they're like snapshots of where I am at that moment, from a maturity standpoint, a spirituality, emotionally, and everything, and intellectually even. So with this album, I wanted to blur the lines as much as I can, and be, as much as I'm focusing on myself in this album, being selfless in a way that I'm welcoming in collaborators and pushing the boundaries of what I consider, my presentation of art, which is one of the reasons why this album is going to be a live and concert album. Because with my background and growing up in the South and growing up in church and the type of influences that I've had from the Aretha Franklins and the Temptations and Al Greens and Marvin Gaye's, I think a live album is sort of a lost art in a lot of ways. And there's something about having people in a room connecting with you, going through the process with you, interacting with you. You feel that energy from those songs that you're performing, from the content that you're giving. And that energy is something, in many ways, that's what makes church so powerful outside of, the faith itself. But it makes church powerful because that energy in that room, in that sanctuary, in that place, you can't really duplicate it. So this album is a live album, pulling in so many different incredible collaborators to coalesce around an event where this album, a concert event that features all these elements of art, from visual art to, photography, people contributing to set and stage design, the activism, the aspect of, like you mentioned, the voter registration drive, transportation, equitable transportation, information on all that, something that's really specific to where I am right now, and that's Charleston, South Carolina.
So you'll be backed by a live band. You'll have photography, mixed media, a lot going on in the show. Okay.
Yes, it'll be incredible. The musicians are really incredible. All of the photographers and the videographers, the cinematographers who we're working with, they're all young creatives the vast majority of all of the creatives are from Charleston, South Carolina, or from the Low Country, the Tri-County area, what they call the Tri-County area here in South Carolina. And I think it's one of the events that is a product of a much bigger movement and energy that's going on here with a lot of the young creatives. A lot of the millennial creatives, we're starting to step into our own and take control in a way that we're saying, this is our expression and this is our time. And we're going to push the issue, not only artistically, but from a community and civic engagement and activism perspective as well. And it goes into, you know, the guys who I admire and who I look up to, the Lorraine Hansberrys and the James Baldwins. And it's the way I want to lend my art to community.
What are some of the issues that you think people will be touching on? You know, what do millennials care the most about, you know, and where can they make the most impact?
Oh, I think education, K through 12, especially in South Carolina. K through 12 education is something that's very important to a lot of millennials. The affordability of college education, something that's very important to a lot of millennials. Wages, you know, like livable wages, affordable housing, equitable transportation. Like there are a plethora of issues here. And then we can go in deeper and talk about investment into what attracts the type of investment that would be beneficial to a millennial workforce and a millennial generation, how the arts are valued as a public good, and not just as a public good, but how it can be a tool that holds the status quo accountable. So there are a plethora of things, police relations with the community, you know, transparency in government, et cetera, et cetera. I think there's several things specifically unique to Charleston that'll get discussed and covered in the show that I think millennials and other generations outside of millennials also care about.
So water, you know, is obviously a very important metaphor for you. We live in the Low Country. We're surrounded by the Atlantic Ocean, multiple rivers.
Right.
You know, how does that theme carry through this piece? And you know, are those ideas carefully curated throughout the entire show, or is it more fluid and organic?
Oh, I think it's organic in the way it all came together and fit together. But it is carefully curated throughout the album and throughout the show, because a lot of the creatives here, as one of the creatives who was a good friend of mine, we were discussing, and he said, yeah, man, we're all pulling from the same well, so to speak. We all pull our inspiration from the same place, from the same energies and from the same issues that I think pervade the city in many ways. And so water, symbolically, as you touched on, in a city that is surrounded by water, in a city that is often flooded, you know, in a city where, me personally, as a man, I'm a water sign, I'm a Scorpio. So, you know, just the emotional, everything that comes along with that, that affects me as an artist and how I create. And then symbolically, water standing for, you know, usually a renewal, a baptism of sorts. You know, we're living in a city where a city that just apologized for its role in the slave trade. So that water becomes even more significant when you start to think about Middle Passage and people being brought over across the Atlantic, you know, enslaved people. So I think all of these themes tie into the album in a very symbolic way, as I'm expressing different feelings and different examples of where I am right now, you know, spiritually, emotionally, from the perspective of like community. So that is all throughout the album, and that is all throughout the show. And it's showed by different creatives in different ways. So it's really cool.
Well, and you have a relationship with the Avery Center and Mother Emanuel and the International African American Museum.
Mm-hmm.
You know, will anybody from those organizations participate in the show, or have they collaborated with you?
No, not for this specific show, but we're offering them as guests, because we're reaching out. One of the main things with the show is giving away 200 tickets to Tri-County area educators and students to attend this show, because so often I wish when I was that age that I had something that I could look to right in my backyard to see an example of this type of high quality art and execution that looked like me. I've worked with the different organizations before in different settings, whether it was for a previous Mosier Festival, a panel discussion about identity and performance. And I think Charleston is such a small community in a good way when it comes to people doing a lot of impressive work, people doing the important work. I remember the Avery Research Center sponsored, or they worked to produce the racial disparity report that I read when it came out. And that then influenced so much of my own work. It influenced the way I began to navigate how to attach my art uniquely to the city where I am and leverage any, platform that I may have to fight the fight for the people, to do my due diligence as an artist, to do in the right way. So I think this one is specifically made possible by lots of incredible sponsors and local businesses who have contributed to basically not only subsidize the cost of those free tickets, but to also keep the tickets affordable to people and to attend the show at the music hall, which is an incredible venue, and also to employ more than 30 creatives and over a dozen musicians of the highest quality to perform this show, to have this event be what it's going to be. And I'm really, really grateful for everybody who's chipped in and who's partnered with us and who's dedicated time, effort, and or their resources to be a sponsor.
Excellent. Okay. Well, Benny, man, it's been an honor to have you with us today on South Pod. You're obviously a deep thinker, a very thoughtful artist, putting all of your experiences and everything into your craft, into your music, and sharing it with people in a way that, with a lot of heart. I think that's maybe a fair way to put it. And you've got this show coming up that people have got to see. I mean, how it's so unusual to see something produced locally that's curated with 30 other artists, mixed media in the finest venue in the Low Country at the Charleston Music Hall. We'll post a link for people to see and buy tickets to that. Is there any last thing you want to touch on related to that show or your life as a hip hop artist and entrepreneur?
Yeah, I just want to say, again, it's been an honor. Thank you for having me on South Pod today. I admire what you do. And the fact that I'm here in Charleston right now with so many other local, young, incredible creatives and musicians and people who want to see, change happen, who want to bring on that new era, that new soundtrack for not just ourselves, but for everyone that we constantly interact with in a place that could be, and in many ways is so special. I just want to let everybody know to, be your most authentic self. Lean into what you do incredibly well. Think of yourself a lot, but also think of others as well. Thinking of yourself less doesn't mean you think less of yourself. Stay authentic and stay connected to people, and stay connected to helping marginalized people, building solidarity with people. And, I appreciate being here today.
Thank you. Looking forward to the show. And we all need to write that new soundtrack. I feel like it's coming.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, man.
Great.
Thank you for listening to South Pod, Rise of a Region, where innovators dish on success, failure, and a rapidly evolving South.